Welcome to the Scariest Things podcast, your gateway to the trends and tropes of the horror genre. Episode 29.
29. Almost legit. 30 is legit.
So we'll be legit on the next podcast. Until that point, we're still just trying this thing out.
The first 28, not legit. We're getting there. Slowly.
So in today's episode, we're going to be talking about the matinee era of horror, which is
the front end. The first end, the front end of the matinee era of horror.
Because if you rewind back a few podcasts ago, we were talking about the golden era of horror, and we
chopped it into two pieces.
Yeah,
we're giving you more for your podcasting dollar.
Because there's enough goodness within this era that we hadn't talked about this for multiple podcasts.
That's right.
So, what we would like to do here is actually identify what are the identifying marks about the matinee era, and what, culturally, I think it's very interesting that each of these eras reflects society about and what the technology of what was happening within the era. And I think in the matinee era largely identified as the 1950s.
Right.
So things that
Although I would almost argue the matinee era took off in about 1955-ish.
Yeah, in real earnest.
Because that's where you get the behemoths, the leviathans.
Yeah.
You get the big monsters, the big matinee scares. And I think it kicked off, in my opinion, it kicked off in 1954 with Gojira.
Yeah.
As soon as you got Godzilla, everybody went, wait a second.
Well, I think there were a couple of them. I've got another one of my picks that came out concurrently with Godzilla.
Yeah. But I mean, I think that's the ultimate reflection of sociopolitical happenings around the world.
Right. Well, and then there are some other things in the 50s, the Red Scare.
Right.
So you have the original Invasion of the Body Snatchers, which plays upon those kinds of the feelings of the 50s Red Scare mindset.
Right.
But there were a few movies leading up to Godzilla,
right?
And the big radioactive monsters. But it really
there's a couple before, there's a couple after, and then you get full on behemoth leviathan monster,
because they were also low budget and highly profitable. I mean,
super highly profitable, super fun, super interesting, and a tried and true formula that you could use over and over and over and bring the kiddies back to the theater.
Yeah, and
each and every week.
And I think actually that what you see in effect is the baby boomers, the advent of the children born from the World War II era.
Yeah, pre and post World War II. Yeah, they were all starting to get to the theaters at that point.
The summertime blockbuster of the kids going to the theaters. If you recall from our previous discussion, there was the Hays Code, which sort of established that you couldn't do anything particularly gruesome on the screen. So the kids still wanted to get scared, and the big behemoth leviathan kind of monsters is a good, safe way for the kids to get in and get scared without actually being.
It's the ultimate in gateway horror.
Yeah.
And my mom continually reminds me that for a single quarter, a quarter of a dollar bill, you could get into the movie. You could get
double feature
popcorn, and you could get a candy bar, and they would give you 2 cents back.
Now,
if you went to a movie today and got popcorn and got a candy bar, you'd probably be out
$20.
20? I bet you'd be out $30.
Yeah, that popcorn. So popcorn's a $7 popcorn.
So we went from a quarter, 23 cents,
right,
to $30.
Yeah, so 100.
Somehow in 50 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're getting screwed. Hollywood, you're taking advantage.
I want my money back.
You're taking advantage of us. Stop it.
So, I think that there were some other cool things that were happening in the 50s as to how movies were getting delivered. I think the drive-in was a big deal. Double features was a big deal.
Yep.
3D was brand new. And I think these were... I think that what all those things were also telling us is that the movie-going audience has moved to the suburbs, and television was in play, and so all of a sudden now you're there. It's kind of funny. We're back to the same kind of an argument now with the way that theaters in our current time are having to deal with the streaming video and the big high-def televisions. What makes you want to go to the theater rather than stay at home and watch it on your television? And I think it's funny to think about it, but in the 1950s, movie production studios were thinking the same thing because the big movie houses kind of stopped doing horror movies. Universal stopped doing, with one notable exception.
Yes.
Stopped doing horror movies, and it got picked up by little companies to make these knockoff things for about $200,000-$300,000.
Right, and I think the other thing you had too is you had the GI Bill in full effect in the 1950s. So a lot of World War II vets, a lot of the baby boomers, the kids of the World War II vets. They had a couple extra bucks in their pocket too, so you could take the family to go see a movie. And then you had all the interstate transportation stuff. You had you had Eisenhower creating the national infrastructure. Or I can't remember what the exact act is, but it was essentially the Infrastructure Act that created the national freeway system. So you had a lot more mobility and portability of individual families being able to go from theater to theater, and you didn't have to hang at your local theater. And there was a willingness to sort of branch out and go other places. You didn't have quite the perimeter that maybe you had in the 30s and 40s, and in the 30s and 40s too. You were also we were still digging out from the Great Depression, so you were you're financially stuck a little bit.
Sure, and I think the attitude of the movies also changed. I think that you stopped seeing so many of horror movies as period piece things that link back to H.G. Wells or Robert Louis Stevenson or the authors of the 19th century, but they
even Ray Bradbury was starting to do some writing too in the 1950s.
Sure.
Sometimes credited, sometimes not.
Oh, really?
Which we'll get to in a second.
Oh, nice.
We'll get to in a second.
I hadn't picked up.
When did Joe McCarthy do his little freak show in the
It was 54 to 56 something.
Yeah, so I mean that was another big factor too, is because they're definitely with films like them and films like Tarantula, which we talked about. I mean,
Deadly Menace.
The Black Scorpion. I mean, the whole underpinning of that is communism. It's the communist threat. It's the communists are going to, come over the Canadian border and, take our women and children.
But at the same time, as opposed to treating movies like A Night at the Opera, which I think that you might associate with the movies of the 30s.
Phantom of the Opera.
Well, no, but just like...
I see what you're saying. Sure, yeah.
That stylistically, I think that you could say that the 1950s was, we're bringing the circus to town, right? We're going to blow your mind with big things. It's like see the crazy animals and it's a bit more of a geek show than I think what the horror movies of the 1930s and the 1940s was much more drama based. Was much more like a stage production.
There was a lot of film noir elements, a lot of crime, and I think the other big thing that I discovered as I was kind of going through this is that the Americans' appetite for horror films waned obviously in the late 1940s as there was just the post World War II malaise.
World War II was horrifying enough.
It was horrifying enough, but what people were actually interested in that period of time, they were actually interested in war films. They were interested in war films about heroes and so forth. They were less interested in the fantastical, the science fiction, the horror, etc. They didn't want to go to the theaters to be scared or titillated. They wanted to go back to the theaters to be sort of reassured. And so I think there was that period too where it was like, I think Hollywood was like struggling with trying to figure out, well, what do we feed the audience? What are they willing to consume? Sure. And I think a lot of audiences just at the time weren't even willing to consume stuff. There was a film that I watched, which I'm not going to dwell on much. It was a 1949 film with Lon Chaney and Bela Lugosi called The Black Castle, and it was sort of billed, at least the internet billed it to me, thanks internet, as a horror film. And I thought, well, if it's got Lon Chaney and Bela Lugosi,
of course it's a horror film.
It's got to be a horror. Or no, it didn't. Boris Karloff and Lon Chaney, not Bela Lugosi. But I figured, oh, well, sure, it's a horror film. Well, no, it wasn't.
I read
It was
about- yeah,
it was sort of a medieval period piece set in this castle.
Couple of grifters, though, wasn't it?
No, not quite. But I mean, there was sort of a horrifying element in that these two people get buried alive. But that was very much a minor piece of the film. By the time I got through the whole film, I was like, well, this really wasn't a horror film, except for this one little horrifying piece. My point in all this is that it was done in 1949, and I think it was that time, it was that period in which Hollywood was very confused about where it wanted to take horror films.
Well, I saw a movie, one of the Val Lewton movies, and we
Yeah.
talked a bit about Val Lewton's
Yep.
Walk with a Zombie
Yes.
and The Black Cat. I watched
Cat People.
Oh, Cat People.
Yeah.
I watched The Seventh Victim,
Oh, yeah.
which it had a satanic cult. But it was the friendliest satanic cult you'd ever run into. It was not a scary movie at all. It was a mystery.
Yeah.
And there was and like all of the Val Lewton movies, I think that they reused. I recognized the green room, or I don't know, it's a greenhouse room.
Yeah.
That was used in The Uninvited. They used the same restaurant set that they used
Right.
in Cat People.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, so it still, it was
Yeah.
borrowing other elements, and so it was a mystery noir,
Right.
but normal. You associate satanic cults with circles and chalk and people getting staked to the ground and devils emerging.
And Satan.
And Satan, and you didn't get any of that. And I was thinking, where's my devil movie? They didn't. I don't think they had come to grips with how to pull it off. And again, the Hays Code was still strongly in effect.
Right.
And you start to see the threads of that coming apart in the 50s.
Yeah.
Certainly by 1960, it's almost gone.
Yeah. No, I think there's definitely there was definitely a chasm from about 44, which is where Cat People left off, to probably around 1951-ish, when we got The Thing, which we may talk about a little bit tonight. I think there was definitely that chasm where I think Americans' appetite, and this is the other interesting thing, because I think Americans' appetite was strictly like war movies, maybe a little Westerns, maybe a little crime, maybe a little noir, but I don't think they were super interested in the time in the fantastical or the horror. If you look at the sort of the films that were hailed as the best horror films from about in that period from about 44 to 51, almost invariably all those top 10 lists are comprised of foreign films. There are there are very, very few U.S.-made films. I mean, for Christ's sake, they were putting things like, Abbott and Costello into those top 10 lists because
there was nothing else out there.
There was nothing else out there.
Well, and the funny thing is that the European film industry had been crippled, of course, by World War II.
Yeah.
So the Brits had stopped doing it. Certainly the Germans had stopped doing it. In fact, nobody was doing. I mean, even with those foreign horror films, they were independent little projects. You didn't have big studios out there. And I think not until the golden age of Italian horror in the 60s, you feel the full force of a healthy
We're back.
European system.
We're here to party.
Right. And that'll be one of Mike's favorites.
With go-go boots and Draculas.
And blood.
Lots of blood.
So I'm going to start this off.
All right. Give us the start of the golden age, the golden matinee era, fearsome foursome list, number 4.
Well, I am going to start off with something that is thematically very much in line with the matinee, it came in much earlier. I think it was sort of a movie that was almost out of its time, and this is Dr. Cyclops.
Oh, interesting.
This is a 1940 movie directed by Ernest Schoedsack. It's an RKO picture. It was in color.
Right.
And it is it's a mad scientist who is trying to recreate life by miniaturizing people and things.
Like Dr. Shrinker.
Dr. Shrinker, exactly. This is so skipping all the way forward to the 1970s.
Pre-Dr. Shrinker.
Electra Woman and Dinah Girl and Dr. Shrinker. Well, I think it actually is a more close. It's a closer predecessor, of course, to The Incredible Shrinking Man.
Right.
One of the great matinee pieces. So thematically, it fits. It deals with a radium deposit and a mad scientist who's he looks every inch the crazy mad scientist. He's got the lab coat. He's got the thick Coke bottle glasses and some fantastic visual effects. It won an Oscar for visual effects back in 1941. And, I think it is the genetic parent to Attack of the 50-Foot Woman, The Amazing Colossal Man, The Incredible Shrinking Man, all that kind of stuff that was so that the kids wanted to see. And it wasn't a big hit. I don't think in the way that you would think if they had done Dr. Cyclops in 1955, it would have been huge.
Right.
I had a lot of fun with it.
Yeah.
It was the acting was kind of what you expect. Although
did they tone down the transatlantic accent?
Oh no.
Yeah,
no.
That was still there.
And you had
so it really was kind of the bridge. This was the bridge.
Yeah, this was the bridge piece, but you also knew that that person has to be a professor because he's got a pipe.
Right.
It's like Mike and I had been talking before this podcast started about how much cigarette smoking there is in these 1950s movies.
And pipes count.
But the thing is that if you only smoked a pipe if you were a professor or a scientist, and that was the way that you could. I think it was your dog whistle cue. It's like that's an egghead.
Yes.
So,
yes.
Anyhow,
tweed and pipes.
Yeah, it was a. It ran counter to the rest of the 1940s programming, which, as we just talked about, tended to be brooding noir pieces, psychological horror, things where I think that the studios were kind of running scared of the Hays Commission and trying not to do anything with really violent stuff. There was you get to see this little tiny dude get snuffed out with a rag full of formaldehyde.
Right.
And it was like,
I mean, obviously there was a heavy duty science fiction component.
Yes.
And at the time that was there was definitely that in it because you had like the emergence of the aerospace industry, you had all of the research being done. Associated with the atomic bomb, you had the rise of Scientology and L. Ron Hubbard. And you had these weird mixtures that were like these weird sociological things that were colliding. Do you think that was kind of like
definitely
pieces and parts of those elements?
The atomic age thing was rode straight to the front. Right?
Yeah,
and it was that science is going to change the world. But science can be abused and do horrifying things to us.
Right.
So that was very clear.
Okay.
But it was the circus is coming to town.
Sure.
Again, it was
fun. Something wicked this way comes.
It was not a deep thinker movie.
All right.
I think if you folks are looking for a fun gateway movie from the era and you're looking at 1940s movies like things like The Black Cat are heady, beautiful
cat people.
I keep saying. Black Cat, that's Bela Lugosi.
There's a black cat in Cat People.
Right. So Cat People or I Walked with a Zombie are very smart, elegant movies.
Actually, they have a little darkness to them as well.
They do. Yeah. And I think they
so
stand up.
This maybe marks the start, the early start.
Like, I think when we talked about...
An island unto itself.
We talked about Hexen and...
Nosferatu.
Der Golem from... as outliers that really didn't truly kick off the era, but it was suggestive of things to come.
All right.
Dr. Cyclops.
So go see Dr. Shrinker, MD.
Dr. Shrinker.
I am starting with 1953.
Okay.
This is a film with Richard Carlson, who was in Creature from the Black Lagoon, and Russell Johnson, who I was sitting there watching it going... Who the hell is that guy? That guy looks so familiar. It was the professor from Gilligan's Island.
No.
Yes. But I had to look it up. I was so ashamed of myself that I was like looking at this guy going, who in the hell is this guy?
So what's his name?
Russell Johnson.
I did not know that.
Yes, Russell Johnson. Yeah, I know. Everybody knows Bob Denver.
Bob Denver.
Yeah. Anyway,
Hogan's Heroes.
Yes,
right? Okay.
So this is a film from 1953 called "It Came from Outer Space."
Good call.
And this really, to me, kind of like got at a lot of those pre-Godzilla sort of atomic age monster type qualities. It was ultimately a science fiction film, but it was kind of horrific in that the space aliens were sort of these brooding creatures that kind of menaced people in this small Arizona town. They were like constantly like lurking in the shadows, ready to strike. You, of course, Red Scare. You eventually find out why they were willing to strike, but essentially involves a spaceship from another world crashes in this small Arizona town, and this school teacher, amateur astrologist, discovers it. He goes down, he sees the space aliens, and of course he tries to convince everybody there are space aliens, people. There are space aliens. Of course, nobody believes him, and the space aliens eventually start to turn the people of this small Arizona town into space aliens.
Nice.
Red Scare. Ultimately, through a whole lot of back and forth. Do we believe this guy? Do we not believe this guy? Because he's credible. He's a local school teacher. It's his girlfriend that's the school teacher. He's the amateur astrologist. They eventually confront the space aliens. The interesting thing about the confrontation with the space aliens, so the screenplay was written by this guy named Harry Essex, who there was originally a lengthy screenplay treatment from Ray Bradbury, and this guy took it and then sort of rewrote some stuff and then cut Ray Bradbury out of the deal and took full credit for the whole movie. But it's all mine. It's all mine. But the interesting thing was that Ray Bradbury, reflecting later on it, said that he wanted to treat the space aliens as not dangerous, but that he wanted to show them as sort of different and unusual, sort of immigration in 2018.
The Silent Earth.
Yeah, the Silent Earth. And apparently he offered two versions to the studio. One where the space aliens were kind and, just stranded on planet Earth, and the other where they were these horrible, malevolent creatures, War of the Worlds. And the studio said, we want our aliens evil and creepy and menacing. Right. And that's what you got. You got evil, creepy, menacing space aliens. So, I mean, there's lots of great allegory with this film. You could the xenophobia, the Red Scare xenophobia, the science fiction, the sort of Cold War stuff going on. I mean, obviously there's allegory to present day immigration questions.
UFO sightings, I think, became prevalent in the 50s.
And I think this was, if I'm not mistaken, this was pre-Roswell as well, but definitely hot on the heels of. Was Roswell 49? I think it might have been 49. All right. Anyway, we'll get back to you on we'll get back to you on Roswell. The probably my favorite thing about this film is it appears at the very, very end of the film, and it's the spaceship is leaving Earth, and then the main character, Richard Carlson, who was also, as I mentioned, from Creature of the Black Lagoon, turns to his girlfriend, fiance, school teacher, and he says. She asks him if the space aliens were gone for good, and he responds to her, "No, just for now. It wasn't the right time for us to meet, but there will be other nights, other stars for us to watch. They'll be back." Nice. And it's this great mixture of sort of like creepy yet hopeful. Kind of all bundled up together.
Roswell, New Mexico, 1947.
47. All right. So yes, it is possible at this point in time to have seen space aliens. What do you got for your number 3 on your fearsome foursome list?
You talked about it before.
Yes.
And this is the predecessor to my all-time favorite.
Yes.
This is The Thing from Another World, the Howard Hawks 1950 movie. Mm-hmm. It's a really good-looking motion picture. It's kind of problematic, and I have to also, I have to check myself at the door because I have to realize this is not the 1982 adaptation, which is actually... both of these films are adapted from the Campbell book,
right?
No Relation.
Yes. Not that I know of.
Who Goes There? And they took out some of the better elements of the novella, which was that
Now, have you read the novella?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So you've read the novella, you've seen both movies, and your marker is on John Carpenter, 1982.
Yeah, I can't not. If I'm going to say that's my all-time favorite, I'm not going to stray away from it.
I don't know. We've been at this for 6 months. You might have changed your mind at some point. You might have seen something.
This one didn't change my mind. It did tell me though that I had seen the Howard Hawks movie when I was a kid.
Sure.
Watching it with my Uncle Steve.
Right.
On Creature Feature. After 11 o'clock when I was staying over at my uncle's house in
Creature Feature.
But I think there's a lot of the tropes that they've established that are going to benchmark the era.
Right.
Again, with the alien invasion.
Right. Xenophobia.
The xenophobia. You get the military as a research arm.
Yes.
And also pitting soldiers against the scientists. And
yes. Border Patrol, ICE.
And family separations, except for this time
separating the space alien.
Agar gets his arm separated from his body. It's a very distressing thing. The arm did a lot of crying. Sorry, but it's the monster in this case. I think if they had gone with a non-human looking monster, this is essentially John Agar plays a Frankenstein-looking thing, and they say he's a vegetable. They talk about him as and actually the creepiest things are the actual seed pods, where the scientists are feeding blood to the plants and going, look how fast they grow, and it's like, interesting. Well, let's keep doing this. And it's like, that was a terrible idea, and it's like it's just making them grow faster. It's like, don't do it. Whereas the actual fighting carrot from space is they actually made a reference to this to him being a carrot.
But you know what's interesting about that though is that in a lot of the films, and we may talk about this more, but in a lot of the we may talk about this more in the latter half of the 1950s. But there was also at the time there was sort of this like agricultural scare, like we don't have populations are growing so fast, we don't have the agricultural infrastructure to support these people. And I know in the film Tarantula, that was definitely a subtext as well. And that's why you grew these crazy things, was to help feed America.
America. I apologize. It's not John Agar. It's actually James Arness.
Was
the monster. And there are a couple of romantic love interests plugged into this, as I think it's another theme that they haven't quite broken away from the 1930s horror movies, where you still have some forced romantic subplots that really get in the way of things.
Forced romantic subplots and lots of smoking.
And
and this isn't the fancy pipe intellectual kind of smoking. This is the smoking.
Just chain smoking. Cancer machine driving.
Thank you, R.J.R. Reynolds, for lots of smoking.
But these movies, I found that the conversation style, there's a lot of sort of wisecracking antics, and making jokes when the monster's about ready to barge in. To cut the tension when they really shouldn't be cutting the tension. They should be building the tension. Right. And they also tend to talk over each other a lot.
Right.
And that got to be a bit frustrating. But I will say that
it's like listening to the Scariest Things podcast.
Wait, shut up. My turn. I think this is a certain marker. You might say it starts with this movie, but I think there's still a gap between The Thing from Another World and where the matinee era really gets rolling. I think this one.
I think the matinee era really gets rolling about 57. I think that's when that's
peak.
That's when it's on.
Yeah,
it is on at that point. Now, see, I have not seen the original.
Okay,
you can put that in the films I'm ashamed I haven't seen.
Okay.
How does it match up? How does it match up in terms of the beats with the remake?
Actually, there are
Like,
some things.
does it follow like a similar storyline, or is it pretty far afield?
Well, of course, both and I want to say Joseph Campbell.
Yeah.
His story was about a alien that mimics other humans, and so
Right.
the paranoia kicks in that you don't trust the guy standing next to you, which
Right.
is explicitly what the Carpenter one does.
Right.
And then when the monster reveals itself, it is absolutely terrifying.
Right.
In this case, not so much. In fact, not at all.
Okay.
But they have. There's still it's an Arctic research base rather than an Antarctic research base.
Big difference.
And
Two totally different parts of the world.
there's no polar bears in this thing. They didn't find the.
They might have
HMS
some
Terror.
penguins.
But they did find they went to go investigate a crashed flying saucer.
Right. Okay.
They cut the monster out of the ice just like they did in
Yeah.
the.
So there's some
1982
similarities.
movie. The corridors. It looks like they used the same set.
Okay.
Right? Which was
Interesting.
great. I think
Yeah.
that was. The sets look great. There is a sequence involving the dogs.
Right.
So that also,
Okay.
that carries
See,
across.
John Carpenter's a smart guy.
And there's also the scientists who kind of go too crazy, also like the 1982. So
Right.
there are some beats. I think
Yeah,
it's a strong precursor.
Okay.
So that's
All
my
right.
number 2.
All right. Number 3 on my fearsome foursome list is The House of Wax. 1953. This is a 3D film that involves a disfigured sculptor who repopulates his destroyed wax museum. He initially is this. He's kind of running this this sort of freeway sideshow.
Roadside attraction
Thing, but it's for the discerning historian, and all of his sculptures are like these great. It's like Joan of Arc and these great historical figures. And his business partner keeps saying, "No, you know what people like? They like the macabre. They like dark. They like scary. That's what they want. They don't want all this historical crap." And Vincent Price says, "I am not willing to compromise my historic wax figurines." And they get into a tussle. The whole place gets lit up, and he gets melted with the hot wax,
Right.
and then disfigured, turns into a crazy person
in 3D.
In 3D, interestingly, there's very, very little explanation as to why he makes this sort of sea change, this business sea change, when he becomes disfigured, when he's stuck in the wheelchair. Although he hires, in this case, he is no longer, his hands are disfigured and everything, and he's no longer able to do the sculpting, so he hires a couple of assistants. One is a former criminal, one is this deaf mute named Igor, who is played by, again, this was another huge shocker. I'm like, who the hell is that guy? He looks so familiar. It was Charles Bronson playing the deaf mute. But there's not really a whole lot of exposition as to why he makes this business change. At some point, he just decides, well, I guess this historic roadside attraction where I was showing people, a wax likeness of Joan of Arc really wasn't that interesting. I should be showing them, the guillotine and murderers and, rapists and thieves, because that's really what people want to see anyway.
Right.
There's a great scene in the film that is so, it is the quintessential, if you could bottle this up, it is the quintessential Vincent Price. Yeah. He's wheeling around in his wheelchair, showing people the wax museum, and the women come up. I think they come up to the guillotine exhibit. The one woman passes out, and he kind of turns, and in his oh so Vincent Price way, he says, "Well, ladies, I can offer you some smelling salts." It's creepy and effeminate and kind of weird and kind of snarky, all at once, bundled up all together. And I'm like, that is Vincent Price.
And that is the impression for the podcast.
Yeah, this
is Mike Cameron's.
That was the worst. If you want a Vincent Price impersonation, that might have been the worst one ever.
Well, here's the cool thing about the House of Wax.
Yes.
Is that Vincent Price is a huge art aficionado.
Right.
And it takes a person of a certain age, and actually older than me, which is saying something.
Right.
Who remembers that he used to have the Vincent Price collection for Sears Roebuck.
Oh, right.
He would buy, and it wasn't just replications. He would go out and purchase art, and and with the intent of selling it through the Sears and Roebuck catalog.
Right.
And so it would be curated by Vincent Price. He also has.
He was the ultimate hustler.
Yeah, but he had an eye for this stuff. He had good taste. He has his own gallery in Los Angeles. I think it's still running.
Right. Yeah.
I think like UC Santa Barbara or something like that.
Yeah.
Listeners, you'll have to look it up. But I was watching a Vincent Price biography, because I watched the Vincent Price movie that'll come in probably in the next episode.
Yeah.
But if you didn't know much about Vincent Price, if you watch his biographies, you'll fall in love with him. He is. Oh
yeah, he's great.
He's
menacing. He's creepy, but he's creepy in a way where he's sort of like he's letting you in on the joke, as opposed to this like malevolent killing creature that you have no association with. He's saying, "No, come along. Right. This is really creepy and really fun, and you should be a part of this."
Yeah, for those of you who only know him from Michael Jackson's Thriller,
yes,
get on it.
Yeah.
We'll be talking a lot more about Vincent Price once we hit the 60s.
Indeed. One of my I will close with this. My last reflection on the House of Wax. There was a great reviewer, John McCartan from the New Yorker, who hated the film. He said that in his New Yorker review, he said that it had set movies back about 49 years. And it could have set them back further if there had been anything earlier to set them back to. He said that when Mr. Price started clumping around and choking ladies with knots that couldn't pass nut muster at a Cub Scout meeting, I took off my glasses once and for all, put on my hat, and left the theater.
Oh.
Yeah.
I saw this.
Mr. McCartan, if you're listening, which I'm sure you're not listening because you are DEAD dead, I will tell you this. It was actually a good film. Yeah, and it was pretty fun. And I would say I think it's a pretty solid marker for the early, like as one of the shining moments of the early part of the matinee era.
This is 53.
53, 1953.
Some other tidbits about this, because this would have also probably made my list had I not sort of gotten the inkling that Mike was going to do this. The movie was made for $658,000. It made $23 million.
Good return.
Which is a huge...
those are Blair Witch kind of numbers.
Yeah, and not to put too fine a point on it, but this was the film that launched Vincent Price's career in horror.
Right.
He was, I think, 42 at the time that he made this movie. Then by the time he signed up with Roger Corman and AIP in like 1960, 61, all of those Edgar Allan Poe movies sort of swore fealty to House of Wax. That this really was a touchstone moment for him and turned him into what we know him now as.
Right.
Because he had been doing a lot of other just costume dramas and stuff like that.
Well, and this one is crazy dark too, because he at the early, I won't ruin the whole film, but early on, as a part of the disagreement with his business partner, he hangs the business partner, hangs him in an elevator shaft, and then takes that very likeness and makes it part of his new wax museum.
Yeah, you want grim? I'll give you grim.
It's super dark.
That was the very first 3D movie I ever saw.
Yeah, and the 3D is awesome. The guy with the ping pong paddle, like he was sort of the carnival barker outside of the wax museum, and he's got the ping pong paddle, like bouncing. You can't see me, I'm bouncing the ping pong paddle.
There's a spear that comes out.
There's a spear. Yeah, there's all sorts of great 3D stuff.
Because I think I was... How old was I? I was like 11 when I saw this.
Yeah, it's a good one. Well, it was re-released it got sort of, because it got a big release in 1953, but then it got a full meal deal, 3D re-release in 1971. They really went to town with real marketing, real budget, real advertising, and it was kind of became this cult revival in the early 70s.
Yeah. Good film.
All right, what do you got? Number 2 on your fearsome foursome list.
My number 2 is The Beast from 20,000
Yeah,
Fathoms.
which we talked a little bit about
right.
once upon a time. Didn't we talk about it in our Giant Monsters, our Giant Monsters podcast?
I don't think I actually selected it at that time. I think there were some other ones that I might have gone with.
Okay.
Actually, if I did, it still belongs on the list.
Oh yeah,
If I didn't, this is. I think this goes side by side with Godzilla in breaking the behemoths and the leviathans. This is the 1953 Eugene Laurier movie, but the director takes second fiddle to the effects man, Ray Harryhausen.
Boom.
And it's a remarkable feat of how to spin gold out of straw. This is... Again, $210,000 movie, shot in the live action was shot in 12 days, and it did gonzo business. And this, I think later on, movies that were directly influenced by it, them, which I think famously, the producer goes, they went into a natural history museum looking for a monster to replicate the Beast from 20,000 Fathoms.
Right,
we've got to do our own thing because it made so much money. And I think it's got a lot of the telltales of the era. It's got big beast, check. Nuclear bomb, check. Scientists who are observers and not actually active participants like mad scientists,
right?
Check. Female scientist love interest. Check. It does all of it.
Cigarettes.
Ticks all those boxes.
Cigarettes. Check. Double check.
And this is. But my favorite moment from the movie is when the paleontologist, the old man, goes into a bathysphere. And once he finally gets convinced that that this dinosaur exists, he goes down and he's doing an observation and he's commenting, and then the beast turns on the bathysphere and you see the mouth opens up and then it cuts short. It's and I remember when I was a little kid, it was like,
he's in for it now.
I think it is.
I will say this about it. I think if you matched it up, because it was pretty much side by side with Godzilla, I think. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of because Godzilla is obviously a Japanese film. There's a lot of cultural touchstones that are very different, but I think this is a much tighter film. I mean, Godzilla kind of rambles a little bit, and there's a couple sections of Godzilla where it does get a little long in the tooth.
There are some hot edits from the Godzilla movie because it's a Japanese movie, and then you sort of inject Raymond Burr into it, and it's a little awkward.
I think this one's definitely if you're going to compare and contrast the two, I think this one is a tighter telling of the same story, or roughly the same story.
Granted, it did not kick off the international love affair with the particular monster. We have not seen the Beast from 20,000 Fathoms again. We have seen Godzilla a lot,
couple times,
and I'm happy for that.
For sure.
Beast from 20,000 Fathoms kicked off a couple of things. I mean, it kicked off the behemoth stuff, and it also helped put Ray Harryhausen in the same category as Willis O'Brien, who did King Kong. But he could do it quicker, and this was just everybody. If you don't know who Ray Harryhausen is, I don't know if you're...
Go watch
you might be 10 years old.
The Seventh Voyage.
Or Jason and the Argonauts. Yeah. So, anyway,
all right.
Beast.
All right. I'm going with the mother of all of the matinee films. This is the high point of the whole shooting match. 1954, Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Yep.
Yeah, it really is. And we've talked... I know we've talked about Creature of the Black Lagoon before.
It's worth talking about again.
It is. It's just a great great film that was just, it just had so many wonderful elements, and plus the filming of it was just so beautiful. They filmed all the underwater stuff in Florida, and then they filmed all the other stuff in in Hollywood, and just a great. And of course, it spawned 2 sequels. It spawned Revenge of the Creature in 1955, so they were like right on it, and then they were right on that, and they shot The Creature Walks Among Us in 1956. It was just like bang, bang, boom. And the other thing, I did not know about this, and I've never seen this. Apparently, as a part of an overarching, brilliant marketing plan, they had developed a comedic short TV piece with Abbott and Costello,
of course they did.
That aired prior to the film's release.
They must have been. Abbott and Costello must have been Universal studio men.
I think they were,
because I think that's all those. And meet Frankenstein's monster, meet the Wolfman.
And this was titled Abbott and Costello Meet the Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Nice.
What a great title!
Yeah, I'd like to hats off to the 2 men who were in the suit.
Yes. There was I think there was only one guy in the suit. So there
were 2 guys in the suit. One guy's Rico Browning.
Yes.
Was the swimmer.
Yes.
Ben Chapman was the big. He was 6'6", and he was a much bigger guy. So they had 2 different suits.
Oh yeah, Ben Chapman was the land guy. Right. Rico Browning was the underwater guy.
Spectacular swimming, and if you guys haven't seen the footage of it or haven't seen the movie, first off, why haven't you?
Yes.
2. Watch the sequence where he's playfully, like with the monster it's very much like King Kong.
Oh yeah.
In that the creature is interested in the damsel. And Julia Adams.
Yeah. I think that sounds right.
And he would reach out and he just kind of playfully
Julia
almost touch her. And then pull away, and then while she's swimming on the surface, he's doing the backstroke underwater. That's a guy in a full-on Creature from the Black Lagoon suit.
That they would have him.
Suit.
That they would have him in that suit up to 14 hours a day.
Right.
A day. Yeah, it's really is an amazing film, and I would argue that Creature from the Black Lagoon, the creature, I think, might be one of the most, if not the most, sympathetic monster out there.
Yeah. Oh, and fortunately, they kind of by the sequel, he didn't die.
Right. Well,
they kind of the other neat thing was this is the counterpoint to it. The Terror from Beyond Space, not narrated to the Terror from Beyond Space, The Thing.
Yeah.
In that, the scientists in this case are not. They're sympathetic. That they're looking out for the creature, but it's a humanistic take on it, as opposed to science. You can't stop science. It's like no, this is don't hurt him.
Right.
Why do you want to kill this thing? And
it's definitely not the Frankenstein. We're going to control it and manipulate it and bastardize it and Frankenstein it.
Right.
We're not doing that.
They wanted to observe it.
We're observing it. We're respecting it. It's interesting too because like in the midst of the atomic age, they were clearly cognizant of this idea that maybe the atomic age has gone too far, and maybe this nuclear weaponry that we now have at our disposals maybe is a bad thing, and that we should back away from. We should ultimately try to back away from Mother Nature and let Mother Nature do its thing.
I think this is, without a doubt, the greatest man in a suit in the history of film. I think, the only thing that I think you could make a case that last year's The Shape of Water was an homage to it.
Oh, 100%. 100%.
And that was a beautiful take on it. But you look at the complexity of that suit, and when you see the bladders moving his gills, and then synchronized with him gaping and breathing, and his eyes bugging out, and those claws. Oh, and the fact that he could swim in that thing, astounding. It's just it is a fun movie front to back.
Everyone go see Creature from the Black Lagoon right now.
Yeah. So you
turn the podcast off. Turn it off right now.
Turn on the Creature from the Black Lagoon.
We won't be upset with you.
Yeah, you could make a statement that actually it is not only the starting gate for the era, but it also may be the high watermark for the era.
I would mark it there. All right. So what do you got for your number one on the Fearsome Foursome list of the best of the front end of the matinee period of horror in the 1950s ish?
The big guy.
Which
Godzilla.
big? Oh, okay. Well, we talked about Godzilla a little bit.
I think this is.
In fact, we just talked about Godzilla.
It doesn't need a whole lot of explanation, but.
So what is this movie again?
It's a little Japanese indie movie. Actually, when you start talking about guy in a suit movies,
guy in a suit.
It's kind of he was actually kind of scary.
Yeah.
And I think the black and white helped. I thought the iconic music.
Right.
And hello to my friends at the Kaiju Cast.
Yes.
I can't do this justice, so
Are you going to do the Godzilla growl?
Foghorn.
Mine sounded a little more like Eeyore.
Yeah, yours was Vincent Price doing Godzilla. I think it almost has to go without saying. That it is. This is 1953. It kicked off. Not only did it kick off along with Beast from 20,000 Fathoms.
Right.
It got an American audience to pay attention to a Japanese film in a way that no other Japanese film probably ever has.
Oh, absolutely not. Yeah.
And you know, it's funny now that in retrospect you've seen so many iterations of the big guy, whether he's the jig dancing monster from Destroy All Monsters, or whether he's the super iguana from the terrible Matthew Broderick one, or the most recent incarnation of the gigantic sort of heavy, it's like carrying a few extra pounds Godzilla. You know, I think that this is it's a touchstone monster. It is an anagram for or a metaphor for the atomic bomb and its destruction of Japan, and it's a way. It's a cathartic move for the Japanese to try and sort of express themselves. And I think more than
Godzilla has become one of the most recognizable things out there. Mm-hmm. It's like John Lennon, the Pope, Godzilla.
Yeah, and
maybe John Lennon,
Meghan Markle,
Bigfoot, Meghan Markle, Pope, Godzilla.
There you go.
Yeah, like somewhere in that order.
So it makes me feel kind of weird just because you almost feel like you don't have to say it.
Yeah. But it's okay.
But
it's fine to say. I will say, it is. Going back.
Rough, though.
Going back and rewatching it. There's some really wonderful elements. There's also some elements of the film that did get a little long and got a little confused. Mm-hmm. And I think it's kind of, as you pointed out, where they were like sort of taking this ham-fisted approach where they were jamming all the Raymond Burr stuff in, going, "We hope this works." There's some stuff that doesn't quite match up super well, but it's still just the monster scenes. Mm-hmm. That's why you go. It's like going to NASCAR. You don't go to NASCAR to listen to the the announcer. You go to NASCAR to watch the crash. Right. And this is the same thing. You're not going to listen to Raymond Burr
Godzilla wreck shit.
You want to see Godzilla break it down.
And granted, he's not the first of the mega monsters. That honor goes to King Kong.
Sure.
But as far as sort of the creature born from radioactivity, there you go.
This might be the first. All
right. Last one.
My number one is a film I had not seen and not really heard of all that much. I knew it existed, but I really wasn't super familiar with it. It's a 1956 film. So I think this is kind of the break point, though. And this I think much like Dr. Shrinker, Cyclops, MD. I think this is a film that kind of stands sort of alone by itself. Mm-hmm. And I would argue in some ways it's got some moments that maybe aren't quite as terrifying as Psycho, but inch right up against Psycho. Mm-hmm. And this is, of course, the 1956 film called The Bad Seed, which it's basically a psychological horror film that's got some sort of noir elements. It essentially involves this young 8-year-old girl, Rhoda, who is a horrible little girl.
So we missed out on this one when it came to bad kids.
Oh, we totally missed out because, man, I'm telling you what, Rhoda, she would be at the top of my list. Rhoda is awful. awful little girl. She's so awful that she gets pissed at one of the kids in her school who ultimately wins the penmanship award. She takes off her newly capped shoes that have like a metal tap on the end of them, and she beats him to death.
Oh no!
Beats the other kid to death with the tap shoes, and he's got all these like moon-shaped notches on his forehead. And they find the body in the bottom of the lake with all these weird moon-shaped notches on his head.
Okay, so officially the Hays Code. Did they submit this for the Hays Code?
I don't know if this was submitted for the Hays Code or not, but I'm going to go even further. So if you want to turn off now, I'm going to spoiler alert plenty on this one, because the end of the film. So you basically. It goes on and on and on. The mother is incredibly protective of Rhoda, the young girl. It's later disclosed to her, the mother's father, so Rhoda's grandfather, discloses that the mother she was adopted, and she was actually part of this super horrible, murderous, criminal clan.
Oh.
And so
the apple doesn't fall far from the tree.
And so it begs the question, can criminality be passed through genetically? And because the mother she's actually a good person, but it skips a generation and goes straight to Rhoda. So,
which is, of course, actually when parents have a hard time with their own kids, wonders like, I wonder if it skips a generation.
Exactly. And this sort of begs that ultimate kind of nature-nurture question. And in fact, they talk a lot about it in the film. They actually talk about and the film is incredibly long. It's 129 minutes long, which is bonkers for that era.
And
to have a 129 minute long film is just so unheard of for that era.
I got a lot of movie binging in over the past 5 days.
Right.
And it's handy when the movies are an hour and 10, hour and 20 minutes. You can get a lot of movies
129
in.
is a whole different ball of wax. But the film culminates with the mother deciding that there's no other way around Rhoda's horrible behavior and the fact that she's killed this little boy. She overdoses Rhoda with sleeping pills and then goes in the other room and shoots herself in the head. I shit you not. This has actually happened.
The mom kills herself?
The mom, she tries to kill herself. The mom is resurrected, right? So that she botches she botches the shooting. She's in the hospital. They bring her home. Rhoda, at this point, knows the gig is up, and she knows where the tap shoes have been hidden. They've been hidden out by the lake. So Rhoda, in this dark and stormy night, while the mom is convalescing, after having tried to kill the daughter, goes out to the lake, and she is struck by lightning and killed. End film.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's like the mom tries to kill the daughter and tries to kill herself, and then the little girl still gets it.
Well, this is
it was shocking.
The Hays Code in full effect.
Yeah.
In that the bad people have to have the comeuppance.
Well, and the little girl, Rhoda, actually does. And the interesting thing is the woman who played Rhoda is still very active in film. Her name is something McCormick. Maureen McCormick. It is Patty McCormick. Patty McCormick is still kicking around, still doing film today. The interesting thing, so the two interesting things at the very, very end of the film, there's this weird credit scene where they bring all the actors out in this sort of like theatrical curtain call kind of thing, and they're all smiling and happy as if to say like, hey, what you just saw was really fucked up, but it's cool because all the actors see the actors, they're alive, everything's fine. And then the mother comes out with Rhoda, the little girl, and they both sort of like joyously go over to the couch, and then she bends her over and pretends to spank her on the couch, which is super weird. And if that's not weird enough, at the end there is a screen card that comes on to. This is after the credits. There's the screen card that comes onto the screen, and it says, "Hey, due to the provocative nature of this film, we request that you not divulge the outcome of this film to anybody that you talk to."
In an era before the notion of the spoiler alerts, this one got in front of it.
Yeah, Bad Seed is. I will say this about the Bad Seed. It's like, as I said, it's 129 minutes. It's super long, so there is a lot of talking. But man, when it gets cranked up and when it's on, it is on.
All right.
Yeah, Bad Seed, 1956. So okay, so let's recap. Where would you? So you're saying you think? Save for Dr. Shrinker.
Yeah,
which is an outlier.
Dr. Cyclops.
I know.
Yeah,
I know it's Dr.
All right. So the candidates for the start of the era, because Cyclops is again an outlier.
Yeah.
Thing from Another World.
Yep.
1950.
Yep. 51.
50 was it 51?
51. Yeah.
51.
Yeah.
Beast from 20,000 Fathoms in 53.
Yep.
And Godzilla 53.
Okay.
So that's
okay.
Those are my benchmark movies. I think 53 is the start of the era.
I think so too. I would definitely say 53 is like when it really got rocking.
Right. So what were yours?
Mine were It Came from Outer Space, 1953, right. House of Wax, 1953, right. Creature from the Black Lagoon, 1954, and then The Bad Seed, 1956. Which The Bad Seed, I mean, much like Dr. Shrinker, it's really kind of its own thing. Right. It does stand alone, but I was looking at it through the prism of it really is sort of this very transitional thing between sort of the noir, psychological horror, and a lot of the like the House of Wax, etc. And the
Rosemary's Baby.
I was thinking more of the where you get into a lot of the other behemoths, Leviathans, later on in the 50s, which is like 57, 58, 59, 60, which we'll get into. There's a ton of those.
Yeah, so this is you're suggesting it's the other way around, that this is sort of a 40s style thriller kind of thing, transported with a little bit more violence into the 1950s.
Yeah, where they could let loose a lot more. Yeah. A lot more.
My temptation is to say Creature of the Black Lagoon. But,
I think so.
But
for the front end.
But it's not the starting gun.
I would say it started with The Thing. I would say the high water mark is probably Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Yeah, and that may
hold for both portions of the matinee.
Yeah, because when we get into the back end of the matinee, I think Creature of the Black Lagoon is the one that is your high water mark. I think I've got a couple of other strong candidates to come.
Yep. There's some other good ones.
There's some really good movies. That's the great thing about the back end. Unlike the golden era, where the great movies were at the front end, the great movies of the matinee era tend to be towards the back end. From 56 to 59, there are so many good ones. But the Creature from the Black Lagoon may be the most solid movie from production, from acting, from story. I mean, more so than I think both Godzilla and Beast were spectacles. Yeah. Powerful moments. A lot of fun. Again, circus comes to town, but they don't hold up to the story through line of Creature from the Black Lagoon. I think The Thing from Another World may be your starting gun. Though it took a while for the other footsteps to come. There really wasn't much between 50 from that movie and 53. There was a gap. Yeah. It's almost like it might have been another outlier as things started getting their footing. I think there were some cheapy bad movies sort of in between. Right. But the good ones started hitting in 53 and then we're rolling.
Yep. All right, let's go grave digging.
All right, so grave digging, as I said, I watched a lot of movies. Yes. And I couldn't help myself, but I grabbed some bad ones.
Get us hipped. Hip us.
1957.
Stay away from.
No, don't stay. I'm not going to say stay away from it. I'm going to say
revel in, indulge
in the badness, in a mystery science theater way.
Royal in.
A 1957 movie called From Hell It Came. This is, oh man, this was a bad movie. And oh man, we're running long on our podcast, but we're going to get through this really quick.
Yes.
So this is a movie purportedly taking place in the South Pacific, but clearly it looks like it's in Modesto,
right,
or something like that. Some badly placed palms and ferns that look like they're probably still in pots. The monster in this case is a tree of sorts. It's a walking foam rubber tiki totem tree monster.
Right.
And it is the dumbest looking monster. I mean, if you think It Conquered the World had a dumb looking monster, check out, I mean, maybe all you have to do, I'll put a poster up for this one. It is so funny looking. The curse, it starts off with a guy who's supposedly a Polynesian. It looks like I think he's got a Jersey accent.
Right.
And he's been staked to the ground, and there are a couple of voodoo priests from Polynesia with voodoo dolls.
Right.
Wrong culture, right? But
why not?
But there's like a bunch of these chickens that are standing around him, and they're just sort of, actually they're sitting around the guy. And it was supposed to sort of be like voodoo witchcraft. There's chickens, and it's a total non sequitur.
Right.
And it filled with some really bad acting, a lot of chain smoking.
Yeah.
And just some preposterous ideas, and then this foam rubber monster that keeps on, it will be standing still, and people have this habit of backing into the foam rubber monster because dimes to donuts, this guy couldn't see out of the costume, and he could have shuffled around and his arms were stiff. It was really hysterical. Second one that I saw actually out of that,
yes.
Make it quick, a precursor to, and I thought this might have been a good one, from a precursor to Alien,
right?
A movie called It, The Terror from Beyond Space, which was about the first trip to Mars. Only one guy survived, and they thought that he killed off the rest of his crewmates, and they're bringing him back home for a court-martial. But there's an alien, and it sneaks onto the ship. It's a dude in a rubber suit, and it really makes you appreciate the Gill Man.
Right.
Because as I said, that creature from the Black Lagoon costume was so beautiful and so custom fit and just looked like a spectacular monster.
Yeah.
This guy, you could see the seams and the wrinkles in the suit, and it looked like a pig-faced alien thing.
They brought the tree monster back.
Yeah, but it did have some things from that you would see clearly, and Ridley Scott took some cues from it. The monster hides in the ductwork and pursues them around the ship and pops out in weird spots and it's like and manages to corner people when they're not looking. So haunted house in space, some stupid shit where they would be like, quick, shoot him with the bazooka inside a spaceship. Right?
Of course.
Okay.
Of course.
Anyways, It, The Terror from Beyond Space, amusing, stupid movie. I won't say recommend seeing it, but it's amusing.
Look for both of these on the scariestthings.com podcast.
Yes. All right.
Or scariestthings.com website.
Website.
We
are the pod. This is the podcast.
This is the podcast. The website is its own other thing.
Okay, Michael.
All right.
What's your grave digger?
I'm going fast forwarding to the year 2018. This is the new Nicolas Cage film called Mandy. I just discovered this week.
Oh, yeah.
This was this crazy film directed and written by Panos Cosmatos. For those of you who have listened to this podcast before, we talked about Panos Cosmatos in the context of Beyond the Black Rainbow, which is this crazy Canadian science fiction film. This one, the trailer is friggin' bonkers. Mandy is set in 1983. Nicolas Cage falls for this young woman, Mandy, and then when he thinks his life is absolutely perfect, these horrifying creatures come to take her, but he's having none of it, and he goes after said creatures. If you watch the trailer, you will see it is this insane mishmash of animation and animation, 2D animation and weird Panos Cosmatos stuff.
So when is it coming out?
It is coming out it is set to premiere in theaters on September 14th.
All right.
We'll get to it on the website now that we've gotten to it on the podcast.
The trailer it's gonzo crazy.
It's gonzo crazy. We will post it to the website. Mm-hmm. It is totally worth seeing. Mandy looks bananas, and this guy's got some good provenance with Beyond the Black Rainbow, which is a great film. Right. I have a feeling it's going to be nothing like Beyond the Black Rainbow.
Yeah, I think one of our Facebook connections, Tom, had cued me into this. And
all right, thanks,
so
Tom.
Hey, how you doing, Tom? I'm sure you're listening. So we caught it. This one, but Mr. Campbell broke it before I did.
Yes. All right, take us out.
All right,
take us out of this. Before you go, I will say this. Before you take us out, I want to say one thing. This podcast reminds me of like our 4th or 5th podcast where we covered ghosts, where I was just like, how in the hell are we going to talk about ghosts? I don't even know that much about ghost movies. And then we end up talking way too long. So sorry for that. Appreciate you hanging with us. Yeah. But it was really interesting as we got into it, because it was a hard assignment. I would argue this has been the hardest assignment of all the assignments that we've rolled through.
Because the 1950s, because it really required me to do a lot of research of things that I wasn't super familiar with. I'll be honest, and I again like the 30s stuff and the 40s stuff. Before it, I fell in love with a lot of these movies, and some of them I fell in love with again because I hadn't seen Creature from the Black Lagoon in many years. Yeah, since I was a child.
It's really good.
So
take us out.
I'm gonna use the tagline from the movie that we're benchmarking as the beginning of the era. It creeps. It crawls. It strikes without warning. The thing from another world.